Welcome to Creepy, the best horror storyteller on YouTube.
Part 1, Whispers in the Attic.
The old Victorian house on Crowhaven Hill was a monument to crumbling grandeur. Dust motes danced in the slivers of moonlight that pierced the attic window, illuminating a tableau of forgotten treasures and neglected memories. Among them, perched precariously on a cobweb-draped trunk, lay the object that drew Eleanor, Jasper, and Reese like moths to a flame, a weathered Ouija board, its planchette resting accusingly on the faded goodbye etched at its edge. Theirs was a concoction of youthful curiosity and adolescent bravado. Eleanor, with her fiery red hair and penchant for the occult, clutched the board like a talisman, her emerald eyes glittering with fascination. Jasper, a lanky boy with a mop of brown hair and a nervous wit, fidgeted with his glasses, his smile wavering between excitement and apprehension. Reese, the brooding artist with perpetually dark circles under his eyes, traced the cryptic symbols with long, slender fingers, his voice husky with an unspoken anticipation. "Are we really doing this?" Jasper's voice echoed in the hushed attic, tinged with the tremor he couldn't quite banish. Eleanor scoffed, a defiant fire dancing in her eyes. "Of course we are. What's the point of finding a dusty Ouija board if we chicken out before even saying hello?" Reese remained silent, his gaze fixed on the planchette, a flicker of something dark and unreadable in his onyx eyes. The attic held its breath, the silence thick with a premonition of things unseen and whispers on the wind. Eleanor, emboldened by the thrill of the unknown, placed her fingers on the planchette, her touch light as a feather. Jasper and Reese mirrored her action, their fingertips brushing, sending a jolt of unspoken connection through their intertwined hands. They formed a circle, fingers tracing the wormwood, chanting the invocation in hushed tones. The air crackled with an unseen energy, the flickering candle flame momentarily dipping before dancing with renewed vigor. The planchette twitched, then lurched forward, sending shivers down their spines. It hovered momentarily between the letters, an agonizing hesitation before spelling out its first chilling message. WLCOME. A collective gasp escaped their lips as a gust of icy wind swept through the attic, the scent of damp earth and decaying roses swirling in its wake. Eleanor felt a coldness seep into her bones, a phantom touch tracing patterns on her bare arms. The shadows on the walls writhed and twisted, taking on monstrous shapes that danced just beyond the reach of their flickering candlelight. The planchette moved again, its movements erratic, frantic. Letters spilled out in a rapid succession, forming words that sent chills of terror down their spines. HESGRE. Then silence. A deafening silence that pressed down on them, heavy and suffocating. In the absence of movement, the unseen presence in the room felt even more potent, a dark entity pressing against the barrier between worlds. Fear, cold and paralyzing, threatened to consume them. Jasper's breath hitched in his throat, his body trembling uncontrollably. Eleanor, for the first time, faltered, a flicker of doubt extinguishing the flames of her bravado. Reese, however, remained eerily calm, his eyes gleaming with a dark fascination. "Who are you?" Eleanor's voice trembled, barely a whisper in the echoing silence. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then the planchette stirred, spelling out a single word, each letter punctuated by a blood-curdling crackle that resonated in their bones. MASTR. A low, guttural growl resonated from the shadows, vibrating through the floorboards and shaking the rafters. The candle flame sputtered and died, plunging them into an abyss of darkness. In the ensuing silence, they clung to each other, their bodies burning with the icy touch of unseen claws. Suddenly, a cold, fetid breath washed over them, the stench of death and decay. A rasping voice, ancient and malevolent, filled the room, slithering into their ears like the whispers of a serpent. "You called me. Now play my game." The darkness pulsed with unseen eyes, the feeling of something monstrous circling them like a predator. They were trapped, pawns in a game they didn't understand, with a malevolent entity pulling the strings. As the first tendrils of dawn crawled through the attic window, casting long, grotesque shadows, they knew their lives had been irrevocably altered. They had made contact, and the price, they feared, was far higher than they could ever have imagined. The game had begun, and there was no turning back.
Part 2. Descent into Madness.
The morning sun bled through the grimy attic window, casting pale fingers of light across the Ouija board, now abandoned on the dusty floor. Eleanor, Jasper, and Reese sat in stunned silence, the events of the previous night replaying in their minds like a macabre film reel. The oppressive weight of their encounter with the entity still clung to them, a suffocating cloak of fear that chilled their hearts and numbed their senses. Eleanor was the first to break the silence, her voice raspy and dry. "We have to get rid of it," she choked out, her gaze fixed on the cursed board. It brought nothing but darkness. Jasper nodded emphatically, his face pale and clammy. "Burn it. Smash it. Bury it. Whatever it takes, we have to cleanse ourselves of this thing." But Reese remained silent, his dark eyes locked on the planchette, lying innocently beside the board. His fingers twitched, a strange hunger glinting in his gaze. "No," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "We haven't even begun to understand its power." A shiver ran down Eleanor's spine. Reese had always been drawn to the fringes of sanity, his artistic soul teetering on the edge of the abyss. Now she feared the entity had found fertile ground in his troubled mind. They argued, voices rising in desperate pleas and accusatory shouts. The attic, once a dusty haven of forgotten memories, became a battleground of fear and paranoia. Eleanor and Jasper, united in their desire to escape the entity's grasp, clashed with Reese, who seemed increasingly entranced by the dark whispers in his head. Suddenly, a blood-curdling screech shattered the air. The candle sputtered and died, plunging them back into darkness. A cold, viscous miasma seeped into the room, the stench of decay so potent it clawed at their throats. Then, from the shadows, a spectral figure emerged. It was not human, not entirely. Tall and skeletal, with limbs like twisted branches and eyes that glowed like embers in the darkness. Its raspy voice rasped through the air, its words dripping with malice. "You doubt my power? My amusement? This game has only just begun." Panic seized them. Eleanor stumbled back, knocking over a rickety chair. Jasper, eyes wide with terror, fumbled for the doorknob, finding it locked. They were trapped, prey in the clutches of a monstrous predator. The entity lunged, its icy claws raking through the air. Reese, seemingly possessed by a dark frenzy, stepped forward, not to flee, but to embrace the horror. He threw back his head and laughed, a chilling sound that echoed in the darkness. "Yes," he shouted, his voice hoarse with excitement. "Let the game begin." Eleanor watched in horrified fascination as Reese's eyes turned black as pitch, his body contorting with an unnatural energy. He raised his hands, and shadows danced around him, coalescing into tendrils of pure darkness that lashed out at the entity. A battle erupted in the darkness, a grotesque ballet of shadows and screams. Eleanor and Jasper huddled together, tears streaming down their faces, witnessing the terrifying consequences of their reckless curiosity. They had opened a door to a darkness they could not comprehend, and now they were trapped in its suffocating embrace. The attic pulsed with raw power, the floorboards groaning under the unseen blows. Objects levitated and crashed, plaster crumbling from the walls as the spectral entity and the possessed Reese tore at each other. For what seemed like an eternity, the chaos raged. Then, with a final, ear-splitting shriek, the entity faltered. Its skeletal form flickered and wavered, the embers in its eyes dimming. It retreated into the shadows, leaving behind a lingering aura of decay and dread. Reese crumpled to the floor, his body drained of the dark energy that had coursed through him. He lay still, his chest barely rising, his dark eyes returning to their natural shade. Eleanor and Jasper rushed to Reese's side, their relief tinged with a chilling understanding. They had survived, but at what cost? Reese, their friend, was forever marked by the entity's touch, his soul teetering on the precipice of madness. As the day bled through the grimy attic window, Eleanor, Jasper, and Reese huddled around the collapsed figure of their friend. The room reeked of burnt wood and damp earth, a grim testament to the horrors of the night. Reese, pale and drained, seemed asleep, but the twitch of his fingers and the haunted tremor in his eyes betrayed the storm raging within him. Eleanor traced the lines of Reese's face, her fingertips lingering on the faint scorch marks, like whispers of the entity's claws. His laughter, that chilling echo of madness, still resonated in her ears, a stark reminder of their brush with oblivion. "What have we done?" she whispered, the words sharp with self-reproach. Jasper, his face ashen, gripped her hand, his eyes scanning the wreckage of the attic. "We can't stay here," he croaked, his voice thick with a fear that mirrored her own. "It's not over." A low moan escaped Reese's lips, his eyelids fluttering open to reveal depths of darkness Eleanor had never witnessed. His gaze snagged on the mangled Ouija board, a grotesque parody of its former self. His lips stretched into a smile, cold and unsettling, as he rasped, "Oh, it's far from over." A wave of icy terror washed over them. Reese, their friend, the brooding artist, was gone. In his place stood a conduit of the entity's darkness, a puppet with eyes ablaze with an infernal fire. Their escape felt hollow, a temporary reprieve before the inevitable storm. They stumbled out of the attic, the weight of their burden pressing down on them. The once familiar house felt tainted, its walls whispering of the horrors they had unleashed. Leaving Reese behind was a wrenching decision, an act of self-preservation laced with guilt. But they had no choice. The entity had tasted power, and Reese was its willing vessel. To stay meant succumbing to the madness, becoming pawns in a game they weren't meant to play. The following days were a blur of panicked whispers and frantic research. They scoured dusty antique shops and cobweb libraries, unearthing lore of ancient entities and forgotten rituals. The Ouija board, they discovered, wasn't just a harmless parlor game. It was a doorway, a thin veil between worlds. And they, in their foolish curiosity, had ripped it open. Each night, they were haunted by dreams of the attic, the cackling entity, and Reese's vacant eyes, burning with an unnatural light. Sleep offered no refuge, only a descent into the chilling depths of their fear. Eleanor, driven by a desperate hope, stumbled upon a cryptic text, its pages stained with the passage of time. It spoke of a counter-ritual, a binding spell that could banish the entity back to its infernal dimension. The ritual, however, was fraught with danger, demanding a heavy price for its success. She shared her discovery with Jasper, her voice trembling with a fragile hope. But his eyes, hollowed by sleepless nights and gnawing dread, reflected a chilling resignation. "It's not worth it, Eleanor," he rasped. "We can't fight what we can't comprehend. Let the darkness claim him, and pray it leaves us be." But Eleanor refused to surrender. Reese, however lost to the darkness, was still their friend. They owed him a chance, a sliver of hope in the abyss they had created. Gathering their dwindling courage, they procured the ritual's ingredients, rare herbs, a silver chalice, and a shard of obsidian, its surface reflecting the cold glint of their resolve. They returned to the house, their steps echoing in the oppressive silence, each creak of the floorboards a harbinger of the battle to come. The attic door, warped and splintered, refused to yield. With a desperate prayer, Eleanor slammed her shoulder against it, though it's splintering beneath her touch. The room, bathed in the sickly green glow of the rising moon, felt alive with malevolent energy. Reese, draped in his own shadow, stood in the center, his eyes burning with infernal light. His smile, a twisted mockery of his former self, sent shivers down Eleanor's spine.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more similar horror stories.